Hey, what's happening, guys? So the Steam Summer Sale is in full swing right now, and I'm really excited. I've already spent all of my money, all my savings on pointless trash I will never be able to play, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't. Now, a lot of people do videos like, okay, here are the best indie gems on Steam for like 90 cents, right? They're normally like $30. Here are the best bundles on Steam. But what I'm going to do for the more budget-oriented gamers who want a true, fully-fledged AAA experience, but don't have the money to shell out 12 bucks for the newest game that's out on sale for 75% off that came out earlier this year, I'm going to list my 10 picks for AAA games under $5. Now, the thing is with this list is that I'm trying to go for games that are not too well heard of, or at least games that are complete experiences. So that means when I say get the game for $5, that means any, if all, DLC is included. Or at the very least, DLC that's worth buying, because some of the ones on this list are either going to be standalone, which doesn't really count, or DLC that's part of the game, but it's not really worth it to get it anyway. So that's why a game like that isn't on this list. So I'm not recommending games like Fallout New Vegas, because it's like, okay, it's like $2.50 or $5 for Fallout New Vegas, but it's $10 if you want all the DLC, and I'll just say, well, you might as well do that and get all the DLC. Alright, so for our first game, we have Call of Juarez, Bound in Blood. This is a series of first-person shooters, Call of Juarez. The first one that came out hasn't aged too well, mainly because of the frustrating difficulty spikes some people have with it. You're gonna constantly mash the quick save key. And Call of Juarez Cartel is kinda shit, to put it bluntly, but this game is actually really fun. This is the second game in the series, and it actually takes place in 1864, so it's kind of like a Western first-person shooter. But what's really cool is that the prologue actually takes place during the Civil War, and you're actually playing as Confederate soldiers. So the perspective is actually really cool, and it's handled very, very well, very maturely, I'd say. It's not like, it's trying to portray them as a bunch of racist, crazy people. They're just brothers doing their job of what their side has told them to do, and they actually become deserters because they leave because they want to fix and restore and protect their family farm. Because their brother's there, and they need to go back, and then they realize, we don't have any money, what do? We're hunted by our own people, what do? So they head down to Mexico and try to find a legendary cache of gold. There's money, women, crime, all this stuff happens. I haven't gotten too far into the game, but the Civil War perspective at the beginning really sold me, and the gunplay is quite fun, it's unique. You're firing cannons, you're riding around on horses, you have special abilities for each brother that you can play as, so you can actually get different perspectives once you replay the game, which is really cool. There's, of course, this conflict that goes on near the end of the game that's alluded to in the initial cutscene of the game, which is really cool. But overall, it's a really fairly well-built, put-together kind of game. That's a lot of words. It's very solid. It's very fun to shoot things. The only problem is the inverted cutscenes in this game, so there's going to be a little bit of patching needed to be done. It's really just a simple mod that you can install. It's not going to override the exe or anything. It's pretty straightforward. Just drag and drop the folders. I'll leave a link in the description below. But yeah, Call of Juarez Bound in Blood. Really, really fun little game. Deus Ex Human Revolution Director's Cut. So this game was originally released back in 2011. Director's Cut is an enhancement, so that's basically all the DLC and some graphical revisions, and some weapon and enemy placement tweaks, as well as difficulty. I'd say it's a more improved game. I haven't gotten too much into it. I've mainly beat the original, like, twice now, I think. It's a really great game, but unfortunately, over the years, it's aged well, but a lot of shooters have come up competing with it and kind of crushed it. You got Mankind Divided, the sequel, which I thought, at least for the most part, had much better gameplay. It was way more fun. The shooting in this game isn't the greatest aspect, and Prey completely dominates it via the shooting element and also the exploration. Deus Ex is a bit more linear. It has very open levels where you can approach it from many different angles, and there's even some hub worlds that are very interesting, where you have a lot of areas to explore. But as you progress through the game, it starts to narrow down. It'll say, like, oh, are you sure you want to leave this area? And then you go to this other area, and then it's like, oh, okay, this hub world's kind of cool, but it's sort of limited in what I can do, whereas Prey, it's this big open Metroidvania style of world. And of course, Mankind Divided, you know, you do have that openness, but the gameplay kind of trumps it. Of course, the story is literally just, has science gone too far, the meme, and it's actually well built into the story because you're modifying yourself. That's part of the RPG element where you can go into stealth mode, do all kinds of crazy things like shoot missiles out of your body. It's really fun. The gunplay doesn't meld too well into it because it's, you know, gunplay, shooty bang bang, and it's actually not very well put together. It's really all the cool abilities that you can do to get through a level, rather than the shooting itself that makes the game interesting. But the story, you know, is fairly well melded into the gameplay. You know, the idea of modifying yourself, you know, are we playing God at this point? There are cool benefits here, but are we really... You know, there's all kinds of really cool social political commentary. I never thought I'd say that. But, you know, it's a little bit ham-fisted here and there, but there are some cool subtle moments found in between the lines where you know, you're just exploring around and you find little messages here and there, little pieces of paper, you know, that have all these little stories on them. I like it. It's a really fun game, and you really can't beat the price for $3.99. Fear 2 Project Origin for $3.74. Okay, first off, fuck Warner Brothers, because I was going to put Fear 1 and 2 on this list, but they are no longer selling Fear 1 by itself. You have to buy the complete pack, which includes Fear 3, which is a piece of shit game, $4.99. I mean, it's not absolutely garbage, I should take that back, but it's really generic, and it's not anything like the first two games. Then you have the Fear 2 Reborn DLC in that pack, again, exclusive to the pack, and it's kind of a cheap throwaway DLC. It's still fun, but it's super short, like 45 minutes. And then you have the two expansions for Fear 1, which are standalone, which are also exclusive to the pack. So really the only game worth buying by itself, unless you want to fork over the $13.74, is Fear 2. Now again, that is mostly a complete experience. Again, the DLC is kind of throwaway, but Fear 2 is actually really, really fun. It's a game that looks absolutely gorgeous, even by today's standards, despite being released in 2009. It's one of those games where, you know, the PC version really did trump the console version. The shooting mechanics are really fun. If you haven't played Fear 2, but you have played Fear 1, it's basically... Fear 1 was all about bullet time and giving you those close hallway corridors where the enemy AI was always on their toes and trying to kill you. Fear 2 is a little bit more generic in that regard. The AI is not its strongest point, but it's still very good. It's a jack of all trades, master of none. So you get more weapons, but they don't have as much kick. You get more level variety, but the levels feel more linear. You get a more variety of enemies, but the AI isn't very well designed around the levels anymore. It's still fun, they still try to flank you, they still try to mess you up, but it's not as tight as Fear 1 was, but it still gives you that variety, which I really, really like, because every new level, you know, you get a new weapon, or you fight a new enemy, or you get a new gun, or, you know, just when it's getting boring, they throw something at you. And for $3.74, it's one of the best shooters on this list. Unless you're talking about Crysis. Okay, yeah, I know it's a meme. Yeah, everyone's played it, but hear me out if you haven't, because this game is really, really good. So, it's not all about the graphics. This is one of the best shooters ever created on PC. It's so much fun. If you play it with a mouse and keyboard, I know that's heresy to not do that, but hear me out, because I played this game with a gamepad back when I was first getting into PC gaming. I thought it wasn't that great. Then I recently played it, you know, with a 5.1 surround system, you know, mouse and keyboard, ready to rock, and holy crap, it turned from, you know, my bottom 200 favorite shooters or 100 favorite shooters to my top, like, 15. It's an amazing game. It's so much fun. It's so slick. You have this open sandbox jungle world that you can explore through. There's not a whole lot to do, but it's a nice backdrop to get to and from each mission. Of course, the problem is, once the aliens show up in this game, spoilers, it's heavily alluded to, it's not great anymore. It's still fun. It's still kind of interesting. In fact, there's some really fun levels with the aliens, but especially when there's vehicles, but holy crap, some of the levels in this game, they can be kind of frustrating. But the beginning levels, up to the aliens, or even through the aliens, when you're fighting the enemy army, the humans, is some of the best of PC gaming, period. Especially if you have a good sound system and a really nice mouse and keyboard. You just really feel like you're getting into the game. And the suit, of course, helps, you know, to be able to run super fast, go invisible, armor up, punch people across a lake, you know, whatever. Getting to and from missions can be a bit of a pain when you have to run across miles of land, it just kind of gets annoying, and some of the vehicle segments just kind of suck sometimes, but other than that, a really, really nice shooter. There is a complete edition of Crysis, but it really is just Crysis plus the Crysis Warhead standalone expansion, which, again, I kind of don't count. It's a really fun game in its own right, but Crysis is the definitive experience as it's sold. There isn't really any DLC for it aside from this expansion. Hey, do you like Zelda? Do you like God of War? Do you like fun, interesting dungeons and platforming and originality in your game? You want to explore a post-apocalyptic Earth with angels and demons and zombies and stuff? Dude, play this game. It's like $3.99, Darksiders War Master Definitive. So this game came out a while ago, and it sucked on AMD cards hard, but they eventually fixed it, so it runs a lot better. It's still not perfect, but it is a fairly well put together game. You do get the original version too, so if you have an older computer, definitely run that instead. So the thing is with Darksiders War Master, it's got a lot of combos, a lot of cool sword play, you know, a little bit of Devil May Cry, Zelda, God of War. Honestly, just buy the game and play the first hour. Steam refunds if you do it under 2 hours, but the first hour of this game shows you a lot. It shows you what the combat is, it shows you what the story's like, what kind of world you're entering into, because it's really, really interesting. It's one of those games where you just have to start playing it and see where it goes, because I guarantee you, you'll be happy with your purchase. That's all I have to say. Left 4 Dead 2. Just buy it. I know you don't own it, or for those of you who do own it, buy it for a friend. That's why I'm putting it on here, because this game is really, really fun if you buy it and play with other people. The AI by itself gets kind of boring. It's just a horde mode shooter. But when you actually crank up the difficulty a little bit and play with friends, it gets more tactical. You gotta work together as a team. You're moving carefully, or, you know, you have idiots, you know, leaving the area out of your line of sight and getting nabbed. It's a ton of fun. You scream at your friends all day. It's $1.99. If you don't have it, buy it. If you already have it, buy it for a friend. Or, you know what you could also do? Buy the Valve Complete Pack. It's 15 bucks and you get Counter-Strike Global Offensive. Just buy something. Just buy one of those two things, alright? Alright? Cool. Cool. Resident Evil 4, okay, so there are a couple misconceptions about this game. A lot of people kind of look at it and they're like, oh yeah, I've heard of that game. Everyone says it's really good. Well, now's your chance to play it. But some people might be put off because there's a giant survival horror tag on there, and some people are like, well, I really like survival, but I don't like horror. I wouldn't even call it a horror game. Yes, some moments can get a little scary, it can get a little tense, but I really call it a thriller in that regard. And as far as survival goes, again, it's like an older definition of survival, like 2004 era, so it's not going to be about, you know, drinking water, eating food to survive. It's more about conserving ammunition. And, of course, higher difficulties can mean, you know, you got to make every single shot count. And some bosses and fights can be really tense, like downright scary even. But generally speaking, I didn't have much of a problem with that. Maybe it's because the HD edition cleaned everything up and made it, I don't know, less scary. But I don't recall that being on the original anyway. But yeah, it's a really fun game. Of course, you're going to have to get used to some of the controls. It's kind of quirkiness, but it did spawn a whole bunch of really fun games off its, you know, behind the shoulder, feet planted in the ground, slowly shooting enemies that are slowly coming at you. Enemy placement in this game is really fun. I think that's the highlight, where enemies come at you, everything seems very slow, but you know, there's a panic when they start to get too close, and you kind of freak out, and then you start missing. The early hours of the game are, you know, fairly straightforward and easy, but still fun because of the gunplay, and then later on, it's like, okay, it's starting to get a little bit more hectic. Now, of course, Resident Evil 5 is also on sale, but that doesn't include the DLC until, you know, you go over that $5 price point. And, of course, 6 is like $9.99. A lot of people actually hate that game. I actually think it's kind of fun, but 4 is definitely the way to go. It's still a very, very fun game. You don't have to play 1 through 3 to get anything. You can just kind of enjoy the game for what it is. It's kind of a cheeseball fest anyway. You don't really play Resident Evil for the story, although you kind of do for the quirkiness, but not seriously anyway. But yeah, it's a really fun game, definitely worth picking up, even if you're not too much into survival or horror, because the game is actually a lot of fun, no matter your perspective. But I can tell you a game that is going to be very, very fun for pretty much anyone, unless you really hate high-speed platformers. Sonic Generations, the collection, which is... It's funny that they say collection, because it's going to include a piece of DLC called... It's basically a pinball machine. Whatever, it's included for the price of the game, so $5. It's a really fun, if not short, Sonic game. It's one of the few really good ones. There are still some problems I have with the Sonic games in general that, you know, carry over to this one, whereas you just go a little bit too fast. It's very easy to miss stuff and just collide off, you know, an area that you thought that you can just jump down from, but really it's a pitfall to your death. Sometimes it's made clear, other times you're just going too fast to see it, so you have to slow down, take your time, but the pacing can be kind of on and off. Like some levels, it's like, okay, go really fast here. Okay, now slow down. It's like, ugh. The 2D Sonic levels, I'd say, fix that quite a bit, and they're actually very well designed. 3D Sonic is more of a, you know, quickly blast through them and just enjoy the scenery. But it's a really fun Sonic game. I'd never played a Sonic game really up until this point, seriously, until I got Generations. I played like Heroes, I think, and I thought it was okay. But this is definitely the Sonic game you want to start out with. It's really, really fun. And for $5, it's one of the best values you can get from a Sonic game right now. You can get about 4 or 5 hours out of the main game, but you have tons of like ways of replaying levels, so that's cool. Alright, so we have the game everyone's heard of, but a lot of people don't know why it's still well regarded, Star Wars Battlefront 2, and that's because a lot of people haven't played the multiplayer for this game, because back when this game came out, especially on consoles, many people just didn't have a proper network connection or didn't know how to set it up. So the thing is with Battlefront 2 is that the single-player campaign is fairly fun. It's a lot of multiplayer missions reskinned for voiceovers and objectives to fit this kind of cool narrative about playing as a clone soldier during Episode 2 all the way up to Episode 5, the beginning of Episode 5 at least. And it's fairly well put together, but it's kind of throwaway at the end of the day because you're going to be mainly replaying all the multiplayer maps. But the problem is that the AI is absolutely terrible. So what do? Well, the reason why I list this game is because I still love it, but they added a multiplayer update, which allows you to play with your friends or other people, and it's actually very, very good. Yeah, you're going to still get those people who have, like, ancient computers with ancient dial-up that cause high ping, but it's fairly well done, fairly well put together. It's still very fun to play, especially if you can do it with friends. The single player, again, the AI is the biggest hurt for that game, but if you can get past that, it's still a very, very good title. And at $3.99, I mean, God, you can't beat that. That's awesome. You can, of course, spring for the Star Wars Complete Collection, which is fairly well discounted. I hear it's been discounted a little bit cheaper in the past, something like $80 for everything. But there are some cool games on there like Republic Commando, some really cool gems like KOTOR. But yeah, definitely give Battlefront 2 a shot because the multiplayer update kind of fixes a few of its flaws and adds a ton of value to it. Great game. And finally, we have Divinity Dragon Commander. This is a game that I actually wanted to really talk about before, but I never really got a chance to. Maybe I'll do it in a Buried Gems video. It's a game I played a whole lot of. I've had a very rocky history with my playthrough, but at the end of the day, I enjoyed the game, and I think you might too. It's going to be very divisive, because I wanted to pick a game that is not very well known, but a decent amount of people have played and tried, and some people are like, oh, I hated it. Oh, I really liked it. It was a really nice surprise. It used to be about $40 at one point, now it's $3.99. So what is it? Well, it's an RTS, and an RPG, and a trading card game, and a risk game, and a turn-based game, and a dating game, and it's a lot of things. So you have basically an army that you command through generals. Generals can auto-resolve battles for you, but you have relationships with them. So depending on the choices you make for your empire, which of course you have a whole bunch of people like emissaries from other nations, you basically make decisions. Some are going to disagree with you, some are not, and that's going to affect how your generals think of you, how your empire is going to be run, how your troops are even going to be buffed. So he's like, okay, this choice will allow me to have better relations with the elves, but it's going to worsen my relation with the undead, so when I'm in an undead territory, I'm not going to get their support, so I'm going to do a little bit worse. My general might not like that, so if I use him in this area, he's probably going to not do as well, or he's not going to get a buff that otherwise I would have gotten. It's very interesting. You can also use cards to buff everyone. There's a lot of auto-resolving going around in this game, and that's kind of like the key to it, because if you could just play every level yourself, you could probably win everything, or at least it would be a little bit tedious, but I think the fun comes in like really managing everything and doing a lot of auto-resolving, because at one point I was just kind of doing that, and I'm like, okay, I'm getting this territory now, I'm sending this here, this decision would be good here. The problem is that the game's combat and everything around is a little bit shallow. There's a lot to do here, a lot on offer, but it just feels a little bit limited sometimes, like when you get the choice of marrying a princess from a nation. Obviously, that nation, you get benefits, and it's really cool. But there's not a whole lot you can do with the princess. There's some cool storylines for each one. It's well worth playing, a second time, but there's so many that... They definitely went quality over quantity here with the amount of marriage partners. Some have some really cool storylines, but like other choices in the game, some of your actions will have consequences that you don't want to commit to. Having choices that have consequences aren't a problem, it's just that in the storyline you might want to attempt something really cool with the princess, but it might end up pissing off an entire nation, so you kind of just avoid exploring more of these options because of that. Like the option to turn your undead princess bride into a living human being, which will anger the undead nation. The storyline itself isn't exactly amazing, and the final act is just tedious. If you're not prepared for it, the final act is a major grind fest. In fact, you might actually want to just start over again and speedrun the whole game. The game consists of 3 maps, and all of your progress moves over between each map. So you have, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. But your armies don't transition over, and in the 3rd act, it's designed to be the hardest one, so they have all this territory ready to throw at you, and you kind of just start out with nothing, and if you depleted your cards on the previous act, fighting off your family, and you get to the 3rd act with almost nothing, you're gonna get crushed. So sometimes it's best to just speedrun from the start, grind a bit on the 1st level, power through the 2nd, and then just throw it all out for the 3rd. And it can actually be fun in that regard. When I played it, for the 4th time, or 5th time, just, speed running through it, I found, new ways of playing the game, and for that reason, it's just really unique. Again, it's not going to be perfect, no game is. The auto-resolve system, though, is really amazing. It's something completely different. This game really wouldn't shine as well if it wasn't for all the choices that you've made affecting your gameplay directly, which I really, really like, and the auto-resolve system is, icing on top of all that. It makes for a really interesting experience. Anyway, that's my long rant about this game. I do really like a lot of aspects of it, but it is kind of shallow. The RTS parts in particular are not fun. They're a little bit blobby. But turning into a dragon on the battlefield and commanding your troops like that is quite fun, even though you can get shot down very quickly later on. But the RPG elements and the variety of things to do make it quite interesting. I do recommend giving it a look if you want something a little bit different. Anyway, guys, that'll be it for me for the Steam sale. It's going on till July 3rd, I believe, or July 2nd. It's always weird. You always got to do your Steam shopping, 1 or 2 days before the deadline, because sometimes, the last day or so is, where it ends, or the day before that is where they have, an encore sale, so not everything's on sale. So do your shopping now if you can. Thank you very much for watching. I'm out.